On a cold March morning, the town's animal shelter is quieter than usual. A blanket of gray clouds smothers what little light manages to push through the grimy glass windows. The wind outside howls, stirring loose leaves and crumpled paper along the cracked asphalt alley that runs behind the building. And in that alley, wedged between two overflowing dumpsters, shelter worker Jamie spots something that stops him dead in his tracks. A German Shepherd, still as a statue, half hidden in shadow. At first, Jamie thinks the dog is dead. The shepherd's chest barely moves, his fur matted with dirt, nose pressed to cold concrete. Only the faintest tremor of breath betrays life. The air smells of old food and rain-soaked cardboard. Jamie crouches down, careful not to make a sound, and gently extends his hand. The dog does not growl, does not bark, does not move. He simply shakes, as if the world itself is too much to bear. A second shelter worker, Rosa, joins him. Together they speak in low tones, soothing words meant more for each other than the dog. Jamie inches closer, heart pounding, knowing all too well the look in this dog's eyes. Empty, distant, shuttered against the world. It's a look that says, "Don't touch me. Don't see me. I'm not here." With slow, practiced hands, Jamie loops a leash around the shepherd's neck. There's no resistance, no reaction. The dog follows as they lead him inside, if following is the right word. It's more like drifting, as if his body moves while his mind stays lost in some distant storm. Inside the shelter is a chorus of hopeful barks and nervous whimpers. The new arrival draws little notice from the others. Jamie and Rosa settle the shepherd into an empty kennel, spread a blanket for him, fill a bowl with water, and another with kibble. The dog settles in the furthest corner, head down, legs folded tight, making himself as small as possible. He does not eat. He does not drink. For hours, he simply stares at the wall, ribs sharp beneath a dull coat, ears pinned back so tight they nearly disappear. The shelter vet comes by to check for injuries. No wounds, no fresh scars, just old ones, the kind that don't show on the skin. After the initial flurry of attention, the staff stands outside the kennel, watching him with a kind of heavy sadness. This isn't the first time they've seen a dog like this, but it never gets easier. Rosa shakes her head, sighs. "He's too far gone, Jamie. Sometimes they just don't come back." Jamie doesn't answer. Instead, he watches the shepherd, watches the way he flinches at the softest sound, the way he refuses to look at any of them. Not even the smell of fresh food turns his head. For a moment, Jamie feels a flicker of something like despair. Later that afternoon, as the rain turns from drizzle to downpour, the staff gathers in the break room. Cups of coffee warming cold fingers. They talk in low voices, swapping stories about dogs that made it and dogs that didn't. The shepherd, already, they've started calling him the ghost dog, is at the center of every conversation. They give him a name because that's what you do when you want to believe a dog still has a future. Jamie suggests Coda. And it's simple, soft, something to hold on to. Rosa writes it on the board above his kennel, next to his intake number, and a question mark for age. Days pass. Coda remains a shadow at the edge of the world. He won't eat, won't let anyone touch him. Every gesture of kindness bounces off an invisible wall. At night, Jamie walks the rows of kennels, pausing at Coda's. He whispers, "You're safe now, buddy." But the dog never moves. Word spreads in the small town. A ghost dog found behind the shelter, too broken to care, too frightened to try. Some folks shake their heads and mutter about lost causes. Others leave bags of treats or old blankets at the front desk, hopeful that something will spark a change. Inside the shelter, the atmosphere grows heavy. Staff and volunteers do their best to focus on the other dogs, the ones who leap at every visitor, who wag their tails so hard their whole bodies wag with them. But always, their eyes drift back to Coda's silent corner. And so, the days stretch on. Coda's fur grows a little duller, his frame a little thinner. Still, he neither bites nor barks. He simply shivers, lost somewhere, far away, a dog shaped like a memory, fading at the edges. But even as most begin to lose hope, something quiet settles in the shelter. A question hangs in the air. What broke this dog? And is it possible, in a place like this, for anyone to find their way back? Unbeknownst to Coda and to the staff who care for him, the story is just beginning. Outside, the rain finally stops, sunlight slanting through a crack in the clouds. For the first time in days, a thin band of light falls across the concrete floor, touching the tips of Coda's paws. It's not much, but it's something. Maggie Harper never expected to end up back in her childhood hometown, let alone living in her grandmother's faded white house on Maple Street. The paint is peeling, the porch swing groans with the weight of years, and every room holds the hush of old grief. Her grandmother Lillian is sharp as ever, sharp with her opinions, sharp with her silences. Maggie feels herself shrinking inside the house, as if each day chips away at the person she used to be. Returning home was never the plan. Maggie had built a life in the wild, chasing storms and tracking wolves. Her camera always slung over one shoulder. She was known in the circles that cared, a wildlife photographer with a knack for finding the lonely places, for catching the world's aches and silences in a single shot. But when her grandmother's health faltered, the choice was simple. Home called, and Maggie answered, packing up her apartment in Portland and driving the old Subaru east, all the way to the edge of town where the cornfields meet the trees. The adjustment isn't easy. Her grandmother's illness hangs in the air like humidity, and Maggie's own ghosts refuse to leave her be. Each morning she wakes before dawn, steps outside with a mug of black coffee, and stands on the back steps listening to the world wake up. Birds chatter, squirrels bicker in the branches overhead. Somewhere far off, a train horn blares, dragging her memory back to another time, another life. The house creaks and settles, and Maggie feels more like an intruder than a granddaughter. To cope, she looks for escape routes. The first is her camera. She wanders the woods behind the house, catching foxes darting through the brush, or the sharp profile of a hawk perched on a telephone pole. But it isn't enough. She needs people, or at least the presence of other lives. One Tuesday, she sees a flyer tacked to the corkboard by the pharmacy counter. Volunteers needed, Haven Shelter, all shifts, no experience required. On impulse, she tears off the bottom slip, folds it into her jacket pocket, and that afternoon, she finds herself standing awkwardly in the lobby of the town's only animal shelter. Inside, the air smells like bleach and dog hair and something faintly sweet, maybe the treats staff used to coax the nervous animals from their kennels. The receptionist, a woman with gray curls and a quick, tired smile, welcomes her, hands her a clipboard, and shows her the ropes. Maggie's told to start with the laundry. Blankets, towels, beds all in a heap by the washing machine. It's mindless work, which is exactly what she needs. By the end of her first week, Maggie has learned the names of most of the regulars. Jamie, who always wears the same faded Red Sox cap. Rosa, who keeps treats tucked in every pocket. The pack of young volunteers who chatter as they work, already forming alliances and inside jokes. The dogs, too, have their own personalities. The tail waggers and the barkers. The shy ones who peer from behind their paws. The bold ones who leap at every visitor. But one kennel remains silent, its occupant never venturing out from the far corner. It's Jamie who tells her about Coda. He's new, Jamie says, voice low. Came in about a week ago. Found behind a dumpster, barely moving. We think he's been on his own for a while. But who knows? Some dogs just shut down. Maggie feels a pull. She knows about shutdown. She knows the quiet violence of grief, the way it hollows a person out from the inside. During her lunch break, she walks the rows of kennels, pausing when she reaches the last one on the right. Coda doesn't look up. His back is to the world, head pressed to the metal bars, eyes squeezed shut. She sits down outside his kennel, legs crossed, hands resting lightly in her lap. She says nothing, does nothing, just breathes slow and steady, anchoring herself to the hush. Minutes pass. Somewhere nearby, a puppy barks, a phone rings, someone laughs. Coda does not move. After her break ends, Maggie rises, knees stiff, and walks back to the laundry room. She doesn't speak of it to anyone. That night, At home, she sits beside her grandmother at the kitchen table. The house smells of lemon cleaner and stale bread. Lillian flips through an old photo album, and Maggie glances up from her phone. "You still taking pictures, Maggie?" her grandmother asks, not looking at her. "Some," Maggie replies. Silence hangs heavy between them. The next day, she returns to the shelter, heart tugged by something she can't name. She finishes her chores quickly, then makes her way to Coda's kennel. Again, she sits. Again, she says nothing. The ritual becomes a kind of meditation, a pause in the rush of the day. Coda does not acknowledge her presence. He does not move. Sometimes his breathing grows faster, sometimes it slows. Sometimes his body trembles as if trying to shake off a nightmare. The staff watch Maggie with a mixture of curiosity and concern. You don't have to," Rosa tells her one afternoon. "Some dogs, you can't reach them." Maggie only shrugs, staring at the floor. "It's okay. I want to try." At home, she tells her grandmother nothing about Coda, but she finds herself thinking of the dog, late at night, lying awake as rain taps against her window. She remembers a lynx she once photographed in Alaska, its eyes wary and wild, caught between flight, and surrender. She wonders if Coda feels the same way, trapped at the edge of a world that doesn't make sense. And the days grow longer, the air thick with spring. Maggie finds herself planning her mornings around her time at the shelter. She brings coffee for the staff, trades jokes with Jamie, learns how to coax a skittish beagle out from beneath a bench. But always, her feet carry her back to Coda. Sometimes she reads quietly from her battered paperback. Sometimes she hums under her breath. Mostly she simply sits, letting silence fill the space between them. And still, Coda never moves. But Maggie is patient. She knows trust isn't given, it's earned. Slowly, quietly, day after day. She does not force a connection, does not reach for him, does not speak his name unless she's alone. She simply returns, again and again, to the place where hope is a thread stretched thin, where every small moment could be the beginning of something new. Unbeknownst to both of them, the first seeds of change have already begun to sprout. The world outside keeps turning. The shelter's routines cycle on, and somewhere, deep inside the dog, who has learned not to care, something tiny and stubborn refuses to die. Maggie waits. That is her gift. And in her waiting, a door quietly begins to open, not with noise or sudden motion, but with the silent persistence of someone who knows that healing starts with presence. 1 minute, one breath, one heartbeat at a time. Nearly a week has passed. The routine at Haven Shelter is unchanged. The same jumble of barking in the morning, the same rumble of washing machines in the back, the same clipped conversations over coffee. Yet for Maggie, something feels different every time she walks down that familiar hallway and sees Coda's silent, shadowy form in the last kennel. Her life outside the shelter has settled into a numb kind of rhythm. Grocery runs with her grandmother's list, evenings spent listening to local news, early mornings with her camera in the fields chasing the fog. There's a strange peace in the monotony, but she knows it for what it is. Numbing, not healing. Even her grandmother has noticed. And "You're quieter than you used to be, Maggie," Lillian says one night, voice gentler than usual as she sips her tea. Maggie just shrugs, watching her own hands, noticing the tremor she hides from the world. Each day at the shelter, Maggie makes her way to Coda's kennel. The staff have grown used to her presence, though she catches them sometimes, glancing her way as if expecting her to give up. But she doesn't. She brings a book most days, reading quietly, in a soft, steady voice. Sometimes losing herself in the words as her eyes flicker between the pages. In the dog, curled up against the far wall, Coda doesn't react, at least not in ways most would notice. He remains curled into himself, ribs standing out starkly under his faded coat, his ears always flat, eyes shuttered. Some days he shakes. Some days he barely seems to breathe. Yet Maggie feels it. The tiniest shift in the air, a tension almost like the static before a storm. It's on the 7th day that the flicker appears. She enters quietly, holding her breath, then lets it out as she settles on her knee up to the floor, just as she always does. And Maggie begins to read, her voice low, barely above a whisper. She's halfway through a paragraph when she catches movement out of the corner of her eye and Coda's ear twitches. It's so small, so fleeting. She thinks she's imagined it. But she keeps reading, her heart beating faster. Another minute, another paragraph. Coda's ear twitches again, this time more pronounced. A quick, nervous flick in her direction. He doesn't look at her, doesn't lift his head, but he's heard her. He knows she's there. Maggie closes her book softly, hands trembling. She doesn't dare speak. The room feels fragile, as if any sudden sound might shatter whatever delicate thread has formed between them. For the first time, she doesn't feel invisible. Coda knows she's there. She spends the next half an hour simply sitting, breathing slow and quiet, allowing the silence to settle like dust. When her break ends, she stands and leaves without a word. As she walks away, she glances over her shoulder and catches a glimpse of Coda's eyes, not shut, but open, watching her go. That night, Maggie can't sleep. She lies awake, the pattern of rain on the roof pulling her backward through memory. She remembers Alaska, the lynx. She'd tracked it for hours, camera ready, waiting for just one shot. The lynx had kept its distance, its eyes wild and wary, refusing to trust. But there had been a moment, just before dusk, when the animal had stopped running. It had turned, its gaze meeting hers through the brush, and for a heartbeat, they had simply existed together, both survivors of their own battles. Maggie had captured that moment, and the image still hung in her mind. A reminder that sometimes the smallest flicker is all it takes. The next morning, she wakes early, nerves buzzing beneath her skin. At the shelter, the staff are busy with a new litter of puppies, and Jamie gives her a nod as she slips past. She hurries to Coda's kennel, hope flickering, afraid to wish for too much. She sits as always, quiet, calm, the same book in her lap. This time, Coda doesn't bury his head in the corner. He lies still, but his ears are up, listening. For 10 long minutes, nothing happens. Then, slowly, Coda lifts his head. It's barely more than an inch, but it feels monumental. He blinks, glances toward the sound of her voice, then looks away. Maggie freezes. She doesn't reach out, doesn't move. Her whole body vibrates with hope and fear, a tightrope walk between joy and disappointment. She keeps her breathing steady, lets the moment last as long as it will. Eventually, Coda lowers his head, tucks his nose against his paws. But he does not turn away from her. For Maggie, it's everything. She waits until her shift ends, reluctant to break the fragile connection. When it's finally time to leave, she stands, brushing lint from her jeans. "See you tomorrow, Coda," she whispers, the words soft and nearly lost in the shuffle of shelter noise. Outside, she leans against her car, eyes closed, breathing in the cool air as if it might ground her. That evening, as she helps her grandmother prep vegetables for dinner, Maggie finds herself smiling for the first time in weeks. Lillian notices, arching a thin eyebrow. "What's got you looking like the cat that ate the canary?" Maggie just shakes her head, hands trembling as she peels carrots. "Nothing, Gran, just had a good day." She dreams of animals that night. Lynx and wolves, dogs and wild things, all of them moving through the shadows, but turning, always turning, to look back at her. The world feels less numb. Oh, for the first time since coming home, Maggie lets herself believe in small miracles. At the shelter, news of Coda's head lift passes in whispers, a cautious kind of hopefulness rippling among the staff. Some are skeptical. "It's just a fluke," Jamie warns. Sometimes they pick up for a minute, then go dark again. But Maggie sees the difference in the way Coda breathes. In the tiny lines of his body, a tension unwinding, just barely, thread by thread. She's careful not to rush things. The next day, she sits farther away from the kennel, giving him space. She hums quietly, a song her mother used to sing, letting the melody weave its way through the bars. Coda listens, eyes tracking her as she moves. When she stands, he stays alert, no longer retreating into his corner. Every night, Maggie lies awake, mind racing with what-ifs. She's afraid to hope, afraid to want too much. But inside, something stubborn and wild, something like that lynx, refuses to let go. Maybe trust is built like this, she thinks, one small flicker at a time. In the stillness of her room, Maggie stares at the photo of the lynx, eyes like molten gold, half shadow and half light. She touches the glass, whispering a promise she's not sure she can keep. "I'll wait for you too," she says, and somewhere in the silent shelter, a broken dog named Coda waits as well. Two souls poised at the edge of something new, both learning, at last, to turn towards the light. Mornings at Haven Shelter arrive with a hush, broken only by the clatter of metal bowls and the hopeful cacophony of barking. The world outside grows softer, spring rain blurring the parking lot and making the sidewalks shine like glass. Maggie's boots leave small, muddy prints as she makes her way through the front door, a brown paper bag cradled carefully in her arms. Inside the bag, cooked chicken, still warm from her grandmother's stove. Lillian had watched Maggie pack it, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "You think that dog of yours eats better than I do," she teased. Maggie just smiled, pressing a kiss to her grandmother's cheek. "He needs it more than I do, Gran." The shelter feels different this morning, alive with the possibility of something quietly new. And Maggie moves quickly through her chores, folding blankets, swapping out water bowls, checking the clipboard on the wall. She doesn't let herself linger near Coda's kennel. Not yet. The nervousness in her chest is electric, like the seconds before a storm breaks. When she finishes, Maggie heads to the staff lounge and unwraps the foil around the chicken. The aroma fills the air, rich, savory, unmistakable. Jamie pokes his head in, sniffing. "That for the dogs, or are you bribing us?" he asks, grinning. "Maybe both," Maggie replies, her voice lighter than usual. She walks the familiar path to the back row, chicken in hand, heart pounding harder with each step. The other dogs greet her with their usual chorus, but Coda's kennel is silent. Still, a hush inside a hush. Oh, Maggie crouches, meeting his wary gaze through the bars. His eyes track the movement of her hand, but he does not move. Today, she decides, things will change. She tears a generous piece of chicken from the breast and places it on a napkin just inside the kennel door, far enough that Coda will have to leave his corner to reach it, but not so close that he feels trapped. She places it gently, careful not to make sudden movements, then retreats several feet and sits on the cold concrete, legs crossed. She does not watch Coda directly. Instead, Maggie fixes her gaze there on the toes of her boots, listening to the shelter's quiet hum, the clinking of collars, the low sweep of Rosa's broom, the rain beating a rhythm on the roof. Minutes stretch, slow and taut. She can feel her own breath tightening in her chest. 40 minutes pass. To an outsider, it would seem nothing has changed. A woman sitting on the floor, a broken dog, curled in the shadows, chicken cooling between them. But Maggie is attuned to small shifts, to the language of wild things. She senses the moment Coda's body tenses, sees the almost imperceptible twitch of his ears. He sniffs the air. His nose rises, nostrils flaring, chest heaving with longing and fear. Still, he does not move. Maggie remains still, resisting the urge to glance up, to plead with him. Instead, she counts her breaths. 1, 2, 3, 100, 1,000. Finally, Coda stirs. It is cautious, almost painful to watch. He stretches one paw forward, claws scraping quietly on the floor. His ribs shiver with the effort, every muscle tight with uncertainty. Inch by inch, he drags himself from the corner. Maggie feels every movement in her own body, heart beating in her throat, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles ache. Coda pauses, gaze fixed on the chicken, then flicks his eyes to Maggie. For a split second, their eyes meet. Hesitation, hunger, the fragile thread of hope stretching between them. Then he lunges, snatches the chicken in his jaws, and bolts back to the corner, curling up tight, jaw working furiously as he devours his prize. Maggie says nothing. She does not celebrate, does not reach for him. Inside, though, her heart explodes with hope, raw, sharp, overwhelming. She sits a little longer, careful not to break the spell, before rising to finish her shift. To the shelter staff, the change seems minor. Rosa glances into the kennel as she walks past, eyebrows raised, voice neutral. "He finally ate something, huh?" "Yeah," Maggie replies, forcing her tone to stay calm. "First time since he got here." Rosa shrugs, unconvinced. "Sometimes they'll eat for a day, and then go back to nothing. Don't get your hopes up." But Maggie knows this is different. She knows the language of eyes, the subtle shift in body, the way the world feels when something buried chooses to surface. That night, she lies awake, replaying the scene over and over. Coda's trembling approach, the flicker of longing in his eyes, the desperate lunge for what he needed most. Her dreams are full of wild things. Lynxes on the edge of winter, wolves padding through snow, the hush of a forest waking at dawn. But always, somewhere at the edges, there is a dog. Sometimes he is close enough to touch. Sometimes he is only a shadow. The next morning, Maggie wakes before sunrise. Rain still patters the window, blurring the streetlights, turning the world outside her bedroom into watercolor. She finds her grandmother already in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "You look tired," Lillian says, but her tone is softer than usual. Maggie smiles, brushing hair from her eyes. "I had a good day yesterday." Lillian gives her a look, half skeptical, half amused. "I hope that dog knows how lucky he is, having you on his side." At the shelter, Maggie repeats her ritual. She brings more chicken, always warm, always torn into small pieces. This time, she places it just a little closer to where she sits, her posture relaxed, hands open on her knees. She waits, quiet and unhurried, letting Coda decide the pace. Again, he hesitates. Again, the long wait. But this time, he moves a little faster, a little less afraid. He still bolts back to his corner once he has the food, but his eyes linger a moment longer on Maggie, searching, questioning. Word of the breakthrough spreads among the staff. Some remain unconvinced, clinging to caution born of experience. Others offer encouragement, a squeeze on the shoulder, a quiet, "good job." Jamie passes her in the hallway, pausing just long enough to offer a nod. "Keep going," he says. "Sometimes that's all you can do." Days pass, and each brings a small victory. The shelter feels lighter, the air charged with a fragile hope. Maggie finds herself humming as she works, her steps lighter, her laughter returning in small, cautious bursts, but she never lets herself forget how fragile it all is. Trust is a delicate thing, a gift given slowly, a promise earned in quiet, steady hours. For Coda, and for herself, Maggie vows to keep showing up, to keep offering what she can, even when the world seems determined to teach her otherwise. Somewhere, deep in the heart of the shelter, a broken dog is learning the shape of hope. And for Maggie, that is enough. The next morning, the sun pushes through gray clouds for the first time in a week, casting thin bars of gold across the shelter floor. Maggie feels it as soon as she walks in. A lightness, almost cautious, like the moment you realize winter is finally retreating, though the ground is still cold and wet. She makes her way through her usual chores, mind already drifting ahead to the back row, to Coda's silent world. The chicken, now a daily ritual, waits wrapped in foil in her bag. Maggie can feel the eyes of the staff on her as she passes. A silent conversation hanging in the air. Is he eating? Did he come closer? Do you really think it matters? She answers with a nod, a half smile. Sometimes nothing at all. In truth, Maggie doesn't have answers for them. She only has questions, stitched together by stubbornness and hope. When she reaches Coda's kennel, he's already awake, sitting with his nose pressed against the bars. He watches her, ears alert. It's new, this alertness, this anticipation. He's waiting for her. Maggie sits down slowly, cross-legged as always, placing herself at a respectful distance. Today, instead of putting the chicken on the floor, She holds a piece in her open palm, fingers flat, hand low to the ground. Her other hand stays relaxed in her lap. She's careful not to make direct eye contact. She looks just past him, focusing on the way sunlight cuts through the dust in the air, the muted shadows stretching across the concrete. The shelter hums around them. Rose's laugh in the hallway. Jamie's boots clomping near the supply closet, the low, restless shuffle of dogs in other kennels. In this quiet space between Maggie and Coda, time expands, every second sharp and electric. Coda watches the chicken, eyes wary, body tense but not frozen. He sniffs the air, takes one slow, trembling step forward. Maggie doesn't move. Her hand remains steady, palm up, an offering. She can feel her pulse in her fingertips. Another step, then another. Coda's nails click against the floor, a sound so soft it's almost drowned by the rest of the shelter. Maggie notices the tiny tremors in his front legs, the ripple of muscles under his thinning fur. When he pauses, she doesn't urge him on. She waits, matching her breath to his. Finally, Coda leans in. His nose twitches, nostrils flaring. He lowers his head, the tip of his black nose brushing her palm, whiskers fanning out like tiny antennae. For one suspended heartbeat, time holds still. Maggie feels the rough tickle of his whiskers across her skin, a jolt of contact so immediate and electric that it almost makes her gasp. He grabs the chicken, quick and gentle, then pulls back with practiced caution, chewing as he retreats a few steps, but not all the way to the corner. For the first time, he doesn't hide his back from her. He eats facing her, eyes never fully leaving Maggie's hand. Inside, Maggie's heart hammers, elation and fear, relief and disbelief tangled into a single wordless rush. She doesn't move, doesn't speak. She lets the moment settle. She repeats the ritual piece by piece. Each time, Coda comes a little closer, his movements less frantic, his gaze searching Maggie's face, as if looking for the catch, the secret, the reason to run. Each time, Maggie's hand stays open and gentle. After the last piece is gone, she folds her hands in her lap, letting the silence linger. "Good boy," she whispers, the words floating barely above the hum of the shelter. Coda's ears flick. He doesn't run. Jamie passes by, peering into the kennel. "You two look like you're solving the world's problems in there," he jokes, but Maggie only shrugs. She doesn't want to name what's happening. Naming it might break it. The following days are a series of quiet tests. Some mornings, Coda greets her with ears perked, standing closer to the bars. Some days, he hangs back, waiting for her to make the first move. Maggie adapts, changing her rhythm to fit his, always moving at his pace. One morning, she comes in to find Coda waiting at the front of the kennel, his eyes bright and focused. Maggie sits as always, but today she turns her palm up and waits, saying nothing. Coda's gaze flicks from the chicken to her face and back again. He hesitates, nostrils fluttering. Then, with a kind of fragile courage, he presses his nose into her hand, whiskers brushing her skin as he takes the treat. For a moment, his nose lingers, his tongue flicks, tasting her palm for crumbs. Maggie stays utterly still, but inside she's coming undone, a trembling that starts in her chest and spreads outward, the kind of joy that's almost too big to contain. The contact is brief. Coda pulls away, licking his lips, his eyes locked on Maggie. Something in his posture has changed. He sits taller, as if a weight has lifted just slightly. Throughout the day, Maggie can't stop replaying the moment in her head. The feel of his whiskers, the trust it took for him to come close, the look in his eyes, equal parts hunger and hope. She tells no one. The moment feels too fragile, too precious to share. At home that evening, Lillian catches her humming as she slices apples for pie. "You got a spring in your step, kid," she says, not unkindly. Maggie just smiles, busying herself at the counter. "I think I made a friend today," she says. Lillian snorts. "About time." That night, Maggie pulls out the old photograph, the lynx in Alaska, eyes bright and wounded, fur dusted with snow. She holds it under the lamp, studying the shadows, the quiet defiance. She sees a reflection of herself, and now of Coda, a kind of willpower that survives in the face of everything that says, give up. She remembers what it felt like to be lost, to keep everyone at arm's length, to wonder if you'd ever want to trust again. Maggie traces her thumb over the lynx's fur, whispering the promise she's whispered every night since she met Coda. I'll keep waiting. I'm not going anywhere. The shelter staff begin to notice. Coda's chart fills with little check marks. Ate well, approached hand, took food gently. Rosa brings an extra treat, tossing it to Maggie with a wink. Jamie leaves a new toy in the kennel, a battered old tennis ball, just in case. But it's Maggie and Coda's quiet moments that matter most. The steady presence, the patient hands, the soft exchange of trust. Each day, Maggie learns more about what it means to stay, to offer yourself with no guarantee you'll be accepted, to celebrate the smallest victories, because sometimes those are the only ones you get. The world outside the shelter keeps turning. Trucks rumble down Main Street, neighbors gossip at the grocery store, the seasons shift and tumble forward. But inside, in the hush between Maggie's heartbeat and Coda's cautious steps, something fierce and beautiful is blooming. A dog is learning to trust, and a woman is learning how much courage it takes to hope again. They are healing each other, slowly, quietly, in a space where will is measured in whiskers and waiting. Afternoon sunlight slants through the shelter windows, golden and uncertain, painting thin rectangles on the battered linoleum. For Maggie, it's become a ritual, these visits with Coda. She arrives after the lunch rush, when the shelter is quieter, the other volunteers gone or dozing in corners. Today, there's a hush in the air, as if everyone is waiting for something to happen. Maggie's hands are steady as she unwraps her daily parcel of chicken, careful to break the pieces small and even. Coda is waiting, pressed against the bars but no longer cowering in his corner. There's something different about his posture, a tentative confidence. Yeah, the way his eyes hold hers a little longer, the way his tail flicks once or twice when she enters. She feels it too, a current running between them, built on hours of silence and careful gestures. She settles onto the floor, folding her legs, holding the chicken in her palm. You hungry, big guy? She murmurs, not expecting an answer but offering her voice as a bridge. Coda edges forward, paws silent on concrete. He sniffs, then stretches his neck, lips quivering with anticipation, and gently takes the piece from her hand. The world narrows to this, the heat of his breath on her skin, the pulse thumping in her own wrist, the sound of his teeth clicking softly as he chews. Maggie keeps her other hand open, resting on her knee, letting Coda see there's nothing to fear. It's a fragile dance. Some days, he's bold enough to press his nose into her palm, lingering for a moment, as if memorizing the shape of trust. Other days, he hangs back, taking the food and then watching her, as if trying to solve a puzzle whose answer keeps changing. Today is a good day, until suddenly, it isn't. From down the hall, a metallic clang splits the air. Someone, one of the new staff probably, lets a heavy door slam shut. The sound ricochets through the tiled hallway, echoing like a gunshot. Instantly, Coda stiffens. His body jerks, every muscle locked tight, tail tucking hard against his belly. His ears flatten, and he shrinks back, trembling so violently Maggie sees it ripple through his fur. The piece of chicken falls from his mouth, forgotten, skittering across the floor. Maggie doesn't move. Every instinct tells her to reach out, to comfort him, but she remembers the flinch, the panic, the old bruises beneath the skin. She lowers her gaze, keeping her posture open and her voice soft. It's okay, Coda. You're safe. I'm here? But Coda won't look at her. He retreats to the farthest corner, shivering so hard his nails scrape against the cement. The room feels colder, the silence heavier, hope thinned to a thread. Time slows. Maggie counts her breaths. 1, 2, 10, 50. She wants to cry. Instead, she stays. She doesn't try to coax him back, doesn't offer more chicken, doesn't reach for the leash. She simply sits, silent and unmoving, becoming as small and harmless as she can. Minutes tick by, the only sound the distant buzz of fluorescent lights and Coda's shaky, ragged breathing. Jamie comes by to check on her. He kneels beside Maggie, glancing into the kennel with a sigh. Happens sometimes, he says, voice low. They get spooked and forget everything you taught them. You want me to give you a break? Maggie shakes her head. No, I'll stay. He nods, leaves her to the silence. Maggie waits. The concrete grows cold beneath her legs. Her hands go numb, but she stays, still, patient, determined. She has learned that sometimes the best you can offer is your presence, your willingness not to walk away when things fall apart. Inside the kennel, Coda remains curled in a tight ball. Eyes squeezed shut, breathing shallow and quick. Every so often he glances at Maggie, then looks away, as if ashamed. The progress of the past week seems to have vanished, erased by a single jarring sound. Maggie knows that feeling, the way a single memory, a single noise can drag you back to the edge of the world. She's lived it after all. She remembers the thunderstorm in Denali, the way her hands shook as she gripped her camera, how she froze when a branch snapped behind her in the dark. Trauma isn't linear. Healing isn't a staircase. It's a spiral, sometimes forward, sometimes back. Eventually Rosa comes to check on her, concern pinching her brow. You okay, hun? Maggie nods, voice soft. He just needs time. Rosa lingers a moment, then sighs. You're good with him. Most folks would have given up by now. When her shift ends, Maggie stands, knees aching, and gently tells Coda, I'll be back, okay? I promise. He doesn't look up. Maggie leaves the chicken on the towel by the bars, a silent offering. That night, the house is especially quiet. Lillian naps in her armchair, old TV flickering blue light against the walls. Maggie sits at the kitchen table, staring at her phone but not seeing the screen. The frustration in her chest is heavy, but beneath it is something steadier, a bone-deep understanding of what it means to be afraid, to lose ground, to try again anyway. When Lillian wakes, she finds Maggie pouring tea, her hands shaking only a little. Tough day? Maggie nods, blinking back tears. He wanted to trust. I think I let him down. Lillian pulls her shawl tight, voice rough with age and something like kindness. Sometimes the world just gets loud, honey. You didn't make it that way. All you can do is show up again tomorrow. Maggie nods, clinging to those words. She goes to bed early, but sleep won't come. She lies in the darkness, thinking of Coda curled in the corner, all their hard-won progress swept away by a noise he couldn't control. She thinks about the promise she made, not just to him, but to herself. Tomorrow, she will go back. She will sit on the cold concrete, chicken in hand, and wait for Coda to decide if today is a day to trust. Healing isn't always forward. Sometimes it's just refusing to give up, no matter how many times the world slams shut. In the shelter, the air holds a charge, a question, a possibility. Maybe all trust needs is one person who won't walk away, even when the ground falls out. And in the dark, Maggie whispers her vow to the ceiling, to the wild world outside, to the broken dog who still waits for her. I'm not giving up. Not on you. Not ever. Morning in Haven, shelter arrives with a damp chill that seeps through Maggie's coat as she walks in, cradling a thermos of coffee in both hands. Her sleep had been shallow, dreams circling back to Coda's trembling body, the sound of the slammed door ringing in her ears long after the house had gone quiet. Still, she's here early, needing to see for herself whether their fragile thread of progress has truly snapped or if something still remains. The shelter is quiet. Rosa waves from the supply closet, and Jamie is filling food bowls, but Maggie barely registers them. Her mind is fixed on the last kennel, her feet almost dragging as she approaches, heart heavy and uncertain. She slows outside Coda's door, peering through the bars. At first, her breath catches. He isn't in his corner. Instead, Coda sits near the front, his body curled but upright, eyes watching her with a searching intensity. His ears prick at her approach, and for a moment Maggie's chest tightens. Relief, hope, and fear tangled into a single knot. She crouches, keeping her movements small, letting her presence fill the air between them. "Hey, buddy," she whispers. Coda blinks, then unbelievably shifts forward, his gaze never leaving hers. There's no wag, but he doesn't shrink away. Maggie sees the wariness there, the lingering ghosts, but also something new. A question, maybe even a longing. She places her bag beside her, unwrapping the now familiar packet of chicken, letting the savory scent drift through the air. Instead of putting the food on the floor, she holds a piece in her palm, arm resting lightly on her knee. She waits, not daring to hope for too much. For a long moment, nothing happens. The minutes stretch, shelter noise fading into the background. Coda doesn't retreat. His eyes follow the slow rise and fall of Maggie's breath, the flex of her fingers, the way she settles into herself. She senses he is weighing everything, measuring the safety of this new morning. Then, in a small but seismic shift, Coda stands. He doesn't dart. He paces forward, head low, eyes fixed on her hand. His nostrils quiver, chest expanding as he sniffs the air. Maggie stays utterly still, holding her breath as he closes the space between them. When his nose touches her palm, she nearly weeps. The contact is gentler than ever. A nuzzle. Tentative, but real. Coda's tongue flicks, taking the chicken from her hand. He chews, and as he finishes, he looks up, his gaze catching Maggie's and holding there, not with fear, but with something closer to curiosity. She wants to reach out, to stroke his head, but she remembers the fragility of this trust. Instead, she smiles, whispering, "Good boy. You're so brave." She offers another piece, and he takes it, slower this time, savoring the taste and the moment. With every small gesture, the old dread in his body seems to loosen, replaced by cautious anticipation. Maggie stays as long as her schedule allows, each repetition of the ritual knitting them closer together. Other staff pass by, pausing at the sight. Rosa leans in, her voice low. "You two look different today." Maggie nods, a shy smile tugging at her lips. "I think he remembers me," she says, barely believing it herself. For the rest of the morning, Maggie floats through her chores, every mundane task colored by the memory of Coda's touch. Folding laundry, she hums under her breath. A tune from her childhood. When Jamie calls her over to help walk a pair of excitable terriers, she notices how her own hands have stopped shaking. The fear that's been clutching her for months seems, just for today, a little lighter. At lunch, she slips back to Coda's kennel. This time, she sits closer, cross-legged. The chicken ready in her palm. Coda stands before her, tail tip twitching, and sniffs the air. Maggie grins, offering her hand. He hesitates, then steps forward, eating from her palm without flinching. After he finishes, Coda does something he's never done before. He presses his nose against her fingers, then slowly leans into her hand, letting her thumb brush the fur between his ears. The touch is fleeting, but it leaves Maggie breathless, heart thundering. For an instant, it's as if all the noise in the world falls away, and there's only the two of them, the warmth of connection shining in the cold shelter air. When Maggie leaves that afternoon, she stops at Coda's kennel one last time. He stands near the gate, watching her. "I'll be back tomorrow," she promises. Coda's gaze is steady, and for the first time, she allows herself to believe he understands. That night, at home, Maggie's energy is different. She laughs with her grandmother over dinner, telling stories about the dogs at the shelter. Lillian listens, her sharp features softening. "He's coming back to you, isn't he?" "I think so," Maggie replies, voice trembling with hope. Her grandmother nods. Sometimes, all it takes is someone who keeps showing up. Before bed, Maggie sits by her window, phone in hand, scrolling through old photos. She finds the lynx again, the one from Alaska, wild and watchful. She looks at its eyes and sees Coda's, wary, wounded, but still searching for connection. Maggie tucks the photo under her pillow, a small ritual, a silent prayer that tomorrow will bring them both another chance. The next day she arrives even earlier. The shelter is silent, the world washed clean by overnight rain. She walks straight to Coda's kennel. He's waiting, eyes bright, standing at the bars. Maggie lets herself hope, lets the feelings settle in her bones. She opens the kennel slowly, careful not to startle him. For the first time, Coda doesn't back away. He stands firm, nose quivering, tail held low but relaxed. Maggie kneels, holding out her hand. "Ready?" she whispers. Coda takes a step, then another, and eats from her palm. His nose presses into her skin, lingering. Maggie closes her eyes, feeling the warmth, the electricity of trust built one small step at a time. Outside, the sun breaks through, spilling light across the concrete floor. It's a new day, and though the road ahead is long, Maggie knows now that Coda is willing to walk it with her. She stays until the world interrupts, the clang of dishes, the shuffle of feet. Before she leaves, she whispers, "You're not alone anymore, Coda. I'll be back. I always come back." And as she walks away, Coda stays near the gate, watching, hope flickering in his eyes, proof that even broken things can find their way back to the light. There is a strange electric quiet in the shelter the next morning, a hush that feels alive, charged with all that's been unspoken and unfinished. Maggie arrives before sunrise, breath clouding in the cool air, a heart fluttering like a bird as she lets herself in through the back door. The world outside is washed clean by rain, the sidewalks shimmering, the smell of wet grass drifting through the open window above the kennels. Coda is awake. Not just awake, but waiting for her, standing tall at the front of his kennel, golden eyes searching the hallway as if expecting her shape to materialize out of the shadows. Maggie pauses for a moment, hands pressed against her chest, taking in the wonder of it. This dog who, not so long ago, had been little more than a ghost. She moves quietly, careful not to disturb the delicate fabric of trust they have woven. The shelter is empty, except for Rosa, who offers a knowing smile before ducking into the office, and Jamie, who raises his mug in silent greeting, letting Maggie pass, without a word. There is an unspoken agreement among the staff now. This time belongs to Maggie and Coda alone. She kneels at the kennel door, greeting him in a soft, almost trembling whisper. "Good morning, Coda." He wags his tail, not wildly, just a gentle, hopeful sweep across the floor. It is the first time he has greeted her this way, and the simple gesture nearly undoes her. Today, Maggie brings more than chicken. She brings hope, shaped by ritual, repetition, and patience. She unwraps the food, breaking it into small pieces, holding it in her open palm just inside the gate. "Come on," she coaxes, barely above a breath. Coda steps forward, each movement slow, careful, full of the memory of pain, but also of the possibility of joy. He sniffs her palm, his nose cold and damp, tongue brushing her skin as he takes the food. Maggie stays utterly still, hand trembling just slightly as his whiskers tickle her wrist. She feels the moment, this fragile trust, echo through her whole body. When the food is gone, and Maggie doesn't pull her hand away. Instead, she lets it hover there, palm up, open and gentle. Coda stares at her, his gaze deep and searching, like he is weighing something very old and very heavy. For a long moment, they simply breathe together. Maggie can feel the hum of life between them, the pulse that connects one frightened creature to another. Then, almost as if in slow motion, Coda moves closer. His head dips, and she lets her fingers drift forward, stopping a fraction of an inch from his muzzle. Her hand hovers, asking a silent question. Coda blinks, nostrils flaring, and for a heartbeat, Maggie thinks he will pull away. But he doesn't. He stays, steady and still. And so, holding her breath, Maggie gently touches her fingertips to his fur. It's the lightest touch, a whisper across the rough plane of his muzzle. His fur is coarse beneath her skin, warm and alive. Coda freezes, body taut, every muscle coiled, but he doesn't retreat. His eyes search hers. Fear, yes, but also wonder, and something like relief. Maggie lets the contact last only a moment, withdrawing her hand the instant she feels Coda begin to tremble. She smiles, blinking tears from her eyes. "Thank you, Coda," she whispers, voice shaking. He doesn't cower. He doesn't run. He sits, chest rising and falling, watching her with a fierce, vulnerable hope. Maggie feels the world tilt, something fundamental shifting between them. She talks to him softly, stories about the world outside, the goldfinch she saw on the wire, the scent of honeysuckle along the fence, the memory of running through woods as a child, breathless and free. Coda listens, ears flicking, gaze never leaving her face. Minutes pass. Other dogs bark and pace, but inside this small world there is only the two of them, two souls suspended between past pain and the possibility of something better. The next day, Maggie tries again. This time she offers her hand a little sooner, her movements a little surer. Coda meets her halfway, pressing his nose against her fingers, letting her stroke the fur along his cheek. The contact is longer, warmer, and she can feel him relax under her touch, the tension melting from his shoulders. Maggie whispers encouragement, her voice a balm against old wounds. "You're safe. I promise. I'm not going anywhere." Each day their ritual grows richer. Coda begins to greet her with a low, happy sound, a woof of recognition, a soft rumble in his chest. Sometimes he noses her pockets, searching for chicken. Sometimes he simply stands with his head against her knee, accepting the gentle weight of her hand. The staff watch the change with awe. Jamie snaps a photo, Maggie's hand resting on Coda's head. The dog's eyes closed in peace. Rosa posts it on the staff board. Progress. Believe in it. Even the grumpiest volunteers find themselves lingering by Coda's kennel, drawn by the quiet miracle unfolding there. At home, Maggie feels the change too. Her laughter comes easier, her silence is lighter. Lillian notices making a joke about dog therapy over dinner, but her eyes shine with something more than amusement. Maggie spends her evenings in quiet reflection, remembering the wild things she's photographed. Animals that had no reason to trust her, who gave her their image, their presence. For just a moment, she realizes now that every act of trust is a gift, a door opening in the darkness. She holds onto that thought, knowing how easy it is for old wounds to reopen, how quickly fear can flood back in. One afternoon, as she prepares to leave, Maggie kneels beside Coda, her hand pressed gently to his cheek. Their eyes meet and hold. In that long, quiet gaze, something passes between them, a recognition, a promise, a beginning. Maggie feels tears slip down her cheek, not of sadness, but of gratitude. "Thank you for letting me in," she whispers. Coda leans closer, letting her hand rest against his fur a little longer. Outside, dusk settles over the town. The shelter lights flicker on, one by one, casting long shadows across the floor. Maggie steps out into the evening, heart full, knowing tomorrow will come, and with it, another chance to touch hope, and to be touched by it in return. The air is thick with early summer warmth as Maggie arrives at the shelter before anyone else, her keys jangling in the empty corridor. Sunlight slices through the frosted windows, throwing fractured patterns across the floor. Today, something feels different. Not just in the world outside, but deep inside Maggie, where hope has begun to settle, quiet and solid. She hurries through her routine, the shelter's familiar smells and sounds comforting now, not oppressive. As she approaches Coda's kennel, she slows, savoring the hush. He is waiting for her, standing tall at the front, tail swishing low, ears perked and eyes alive with anticipation. Maggie kneels, unlocking the gate with steady hands. The metal gives a soft click. For a moment, everything pauses. Her breath, the hum of the lights, even the restless pacing of the other dogs. "Good morning, Coda," she whispers, voice trembling but sure. He watches her, head tilted, body poised at the edge of something he wants but doesn't quite understand. Maggie remembers all the days when this simple act, opening the kennel door, would have sent him retreating to the farthest corner, eyes wild with fear. Now, he holds his ground, nose twitching, weight shifting from paw to paw. She pushes the door open slowly, just a crack at first, then wider, watching for any sign of panic. Coda stays put, muscles tense but steady, gaze fixed on her. Maggie settles onto her knees, just inside the threshold, making herself small, inviting but never demanding. She pats her leg, soft and encouraging. "Come on, it's okay." You can do this. A long moment stretches between them. Coda's chest heaves, breath shallow, eyes darting to the open space behind her. Maggie waits, patient, willing him to make the choice himself. Outside, the world glimmers with possibility. A chorus of birds, the scent of cut grass drifting through the cracked window, life humming just beyond the shelter walls. Inside, the silence is thick, broken only by the sound of Coda's nails on concrete as he inches forward. He pauses at the edge of the kennel, nose hovering above Maggie's outstretched hand. She stays still, barely breathing. Coda's body trembles, a visible shiver that starts in his shoulders and works its way down to his tail. Maggie keeps her voice soft, her energy open, her own body calm. It's your choice, Coda. Whenever you're ready. For the first time, he steps past the threshold. It's awkward and slow, his legs stiff with uncertainty. But he comes, pressing his head into Maggie's chest with a sigh so deep it seems to rise from somewhere ancient. The contact is heavy, an anchor in the spinning world. Maggie wraps her arms around him, feeling the thinness of his frame, the rapid flutter of his heart. Coda's body is tense at first, but as she holds him, he softens, leaning his weight against her, trusting her to hold him up. Tears sting Maggie's eyes, but she blinks them away, not wanting to break the moment. She murmurs words she doesn't fully remember later. Nonsense. Comfort. Gratitude. You did it, Coda. You're so brave. I'm right here. I'm not leaving. For a while, there is no one else in the world. Maggie can feel the steady beat of his heart, the rise and fall of his chest. Her own breath slows, a calmness settling over her that she hasn't felt in years. Behind her, footsteps echo in the hallway. Jamie appears, stopping dead in the doorway at the sight before him. Well, I'll be damned, he whispers, a smile breaking over his face. Rosa hurries over, her eyes wide with disbelief and wonder. For a moment, the three of them stand in silent awe, watching as Coda rests his head on Maggie's shoulder, his body melting into her embrace. Do you want a leash? Rosa asks softly. Maggie shakes her head. Not yet. Let's just be here. The others nod, retreating to give them space. For the first time since his arrival, Coda is free. Free from the prison of his own fear, from the cycle of distrust that had kept him locked away from the world. When Maggie finally stands, Coda follows, shadowing her every step. She doesn't force him to explore. Instead, she lets him wander at his own pace, sniffing the hallway, pausing at each new smell. The other dogs bark, but Coda pays them no mind, eyes fixed on Maggie, as if she is the only compass that matters. Later, back in his kennel, he sits near the gate, not in the corner, watching as Maggie straightens his blanket and fills his water bowl. She smiles at him, heart overflowing. You did it. You really did it. For the rest of the day, Coda has changed. He greets staff with cautious interest, noses a tennis ball left by Jamie, even accepts a treat from Rosa's hand. The old ghosts are still there. Maggie can see them flickering in his eyes. But now they are outnumbered by something new. Trust, curiosity, hope. At home that evening, Maggie tells her grandmother everything, tears and laughter tangled together. He came out, Gran. He came all the way out let me hold him. I didn't think I'd ever see that day. Lillian squeezes her hand. Sometimes, honey, you just have to open the door. The ones who want to be free will come through in their own time. That night, Maggie lies awake, remembering the weight of Coda's head against her chest, the warmth of his fur, the bright certainty in his eyes. She knows the road ahead will have setbacks. Trust is fragile, easily bruised. But she also knows, with a certainty born of hard-won hope, that this is the moment everything changed. In the darkness, Maggie whispers a promise to herself and to Coda, wherever he's sleeping in the shelter. I'll keep the door open. I'll be here every time you're ready to walk through. Outside, the night is gentle. The world turns. In a quiet shelter on the edge of town, two souls, wounded but healing, stand together, ready for whatever comes next. The morning sun creeps over Maple Street, spilling warmth through the windows of the shelter. The world seems brighter, lighter, as if even the clouds sense a shift in the air. For Maggie, everything feels subtly, profoundly changed. It's not just the gentle light or the promise of summer at the edge of the wind. It's the knowing, deep in her bones, that Coda's story is no longer just one of survival, but of possibility. Maggie wakes early, restless, excitement mingling with nerves. Then she barely touches her coffee before leaving the house. Lillian watching her from the kitchen table with a knowing smile. "You're going to see your boy?" Maggie laughs softly, shoulders loosening. "I am. Today's the day, Gran. I can feel it." At the shelter, Jamie is already there, checking off the morning list. Rosa arrives a few minutes later, holding a new collar and leash. A hopeful gesture, not yet spoken aloud. Maggie's heart thuds in her chest as she moves through the familiar hall, hands shaking with anticipation. Coda is waiting, sitting tall at the front of his kennel. His fur is still a little ragged, but there's a shine to his eyes, a confidence that wasn't there before. When Maggie opens the gate, he doesn't hesitate. He steps forward, brushing his head against her hand, tail wagging in a slow, sure rhythm. She kneels and wraps her arms around him, feeling the steady thump of his heart. He leans into her, warmth and trust flowing between them. There's a hush as the other staff gather nearby, a sense that they're all witnessing something fragile and extraordinary. Maggie whispers into his fur, "You're safe now. For real this time." She stands, slipping the new collar around his neck, fingers nimble despite her nerves. The leash clips on with a soft snap. Coda looks up at her, not with fear, but with a calm certainty that undoes her. She smiles through tears, nodding to Jamie and Rosa. "Ready, boy?" They step into the hall. Coda's paws quiet against the floor. He doesn't flinch as they pass the barking kennels. He walks beside Maggie, glancing at her for reassurance, then straight ahead. At the front door, she kneels again, letting him sniff the air that tumbles in from outside. Green, wild, full of life. The world beyond the shelter is dazzling. Blue sky, the scent of cut grass, the sound of distant laughter. Maggie leads him to the small garden behind the building, away from the traffic, away from anything that might remind him of old fears. She sits on the grass, Coda pressed against her side, the sun warm on their faces. Rosa joins them, sitting cross-legged nearby, offering Coda a biscuit. He takes it gently, a tail thumping. Jamie tosses him a tennis ball, and for the first time, Coda chases after it. Not wildly, but with curiosity, nose to the ground, tail high. The garden fills with laughter and quiet awe. Maggie wipes her cheeks, unable to stop smiling. "He's home," Jamie says, voice thick. Maggie nods, words caught in her throat. "He chose it. He chose us." The rest of the day is a celebration, small, joyful, full of life. The staff take turns sitting with Coda, brushing his fur, sharing stories of the old days and the hopes they have for him now. Coda basks in the attention, ears flicking, eyes shining with trust. When the time comes to leave, Maggie hesitates at the door. She looks down at Coda, at the hope and gratitude shining in his eyes. You ready to go home, buddy?" She signs the last of the paperwork, hands trembling just a little, and leads Coda out to her car. He jumps in, settling beside her, head resting on her lap as she drives. The road home is quiet, lined with wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. At the house, Lillian is waiting on the porch. She smiles as Coda bounds up the steps, wagging his tail, sniffing every inch of the old wood. Maggie laughs, breathless, tears in her eyes. Lillian reaches down, stroking Coda's head. "Welcome home, handsome. You take care of my girl. You hear?" Inside, Coda explores every room, nose to the floor, ears perked, tail swishing in lazy arcs. Maggie follows, watching him settle onto the old rug by the window, sunlight spilling across his fur. She sits beside him, her hand resting on his back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. That night, Maggie lies awake, Coda curled at her feet. The house feels full, alive in a way it hasn't in years. She thinks of all they've survived, each setback, each fragile step forward, every moment that almost broke them, and she knows this is what healing looks like. Not a straight line, but a winding road, paved with trust and choice, and the courage to try again. In the weeks that follow, Maggie and Coda build a new life together. They walk the neighborhood, neighbors waving from porches, children stopping to ask if it's a way they can pet the big dog. With the kind eyes, Coda is gentle, patient, letting them stroke his ears, leaning into their touch. At the shelter, his story spreads, volunteers sharing it with new arrivals, staff whispering it in quiet moments. He had every reason not to trust, Rosa says to a nervous teenager one afternoon. But when he chose to try again, that's where the healing began. Maggie photographs Coda in the golden light of evening, his fur glowing, eyes alight with joy. She shares the pictures online, her words a quiet plea to anyone who needs it. He had every reason not to trust, but when he chose to try again, that's where the healing began. If you believe in second chances, share this. You never know who might need it. And for Maggie, for Coda, and for all the broken things that find their way home, the door remains open. A promise that no one is ever truly alone, and that the bravest choice of all is to trust, to hope, and to try one more time.